For decades, when conflict erupted anywhere on Earth, one country's shadow appeared almost instantly. Not by accident, not by coincidence. From deserts to jungles, from frozen mountains to distant seas, one flag kept returning. The American flag. Some saw protection, others saw dominance. Many saw no choice at all. But today, as the world shifts and tensions rise, a question demands to be asked. Is the United States still the world's policeman? Or is this role slowly slipping away? Before you decide what you believe, watch carefully. Because this story isn't about politics. It's about power, responsibility, and the price of controlling a world that no longer wants to be controlled. Stay with us. What you're about to see explains how we got here. The year is 1945. The world is broken. Europe lies in rubble. Asia is scarred by fire and occupation. Entire economies have collapsed. More than 60 million people are dead. And from this destruction, a single truth emerges. The old world order is gone. Empires that once ruled continents are bankrupt, exhausted, and discredited. But one nation stands untouched by invasion and strengthened by war. The United States of America. Its factories are running. Its military is massive. Its economy is booming. And for the first time in history, the center of global power shifts across the Atlantic. The United States faces a choice. Retreat behind oceans and borders, or step into a leadership role the world has never seen before. Washington chooses leadership. The U.S. helps rebuild Europe through massive economic programs. It supports the creation of international institutions meant to prevent future wars. It commits troops overseas not temporarily, but permanently. This is not conquest. This is containment. The goal is simple: prevent chaos from returning, but stability has a cost, and America is willing to pay it. Peace does not last long. As Europe rebuilds, a new rivalry takes shape. Two ideologies, two superpowers, one planet, the United States versus the Soviet Union. This is not a traditional war. There are no formal declarations, no clear front lines. Instead, influence becomes the battlefield. Every region matters, every government matters, every rebellion matters. And America takes on a new responsibility: to stop the spread of its rivals' influence anywhere, everywhere. Slowly, quietly, the United States builds a global presence unlike anything before. Military bases appear across Europe. Naval fleets patrol the Pacific and Atlantic. Alliances form: NATO, security treaties, mutual defense agreements. America is no longer just defending itself. It is defending an entire system: capitalism, alliances, a specific vision of global order. This is where the term world's policeman begins to take shape, not officially, but practically. The Cold War heats up, not in Washington or Moscow, but in smaller nations caught in between. Korea becomes the first major test, then Vietnam. Elsewhere, covert operations shape governments behind the scenes. The logic is consistent. If America does not intervene, its rival will. But each intervention leaves scars. Lives lost, nations destabilized, trust questioned. Still, the U.S. continues, because pulling back feels more dangerous than pushing forward. Around the world, reactions to American power are divided. Some nations feel protected, others feel controlled. Some welcome U.S. troops, others protest their presence. But even critics recognize a reality. When conflict explodes, America responds. When trade routes are threatened, America intervenes. When allies are attacked, America reacts. The world adapts to this expectation. America becomes the default responder, the policeman. Then, something unexpected happens. The Soviet Union collapses. The Cold War ends, not with a final battle, but with economic and political exhaustion. Suddenly, America stands alone. No rival superpower, no equal challenger. This moment changes everything. For the first time, the U.S. is not balancing power. It is power. The 1990s usher in a new era. The United States leads international coalitions. It enforces no-fly zones. It intervenes in regional conflicts. Its military technology is unmatched. Its economy dominates global markets. This period is often described as America's unipolar moment. One nation, one dominant force. Many believe this role is permanent, but history rarely works that way. Power creates responsibility, and responsibility creates fatigue. Maintaining global order requires constant attention. troops deployed year after year, budgets expanding, public patience thinning. At home, questions begin to surface. How long can this last? How much is too much? What happens if America steps back? These questions remain unanswered until a single morning changes everything. As the new millennium begins, threats no longer come from rival superpowers alone. They emerge from shadows, from networks without borders, from enemies without armies. America's role as the world's policeman is about to be tested in ways no one predicted, and the decisions made next will redefine global power forever. The United States rose from the ruins of war to become the enforcer of global order. It built alliances, it fought wars, it shaped the world. But power attracts resistance, and the very system America created is about to challenge it. For decades, one nation held a role it never formally asked for, but always seemed to embrace the world's policeman. But what happens when that power becomes a burden? What happens when the cost of intervention outweighs the reward? The attack did not come from a rival superpower. It wasn't announced with tanks, armies, or declarations of war. It came quietly, suddenly, from the shadows. And in just a few hours, it forever changed how the United States saw the world and how the world saw the United States. September 11th, 2001. On that clear morning, the world watched in horror as symbols of American power were struck in ways no one had imagined possible. For the first time in modern history, the United States wasn't projecting its strength abroad. It was absorbing a devastating shock at home. The response was immediate, and the language was absolute. This wasn't just an attack, it was a declaration. In America, the world's policeman prepared to act. Within weeks, U.S. forces were deployed across the globe. The mission was crystal clear: destroy terrorist networks and eliminate threats before they could ever reach American soil. But the scale of this response quickly grew. What started as a focused counterterrorism operation evolved into full-scale wars, long-term occupations, and ambitious nation-building efforts. First Afghanistan, then Iraq. Two conflicts that would come to define an entire generation. The war in Iraq marked a critical turning point. The justification for invasion was presented as urgent, but the intelligence it was based on was fiercely contested. The consequences proved to be lasting. While the United States successfully removed a hostile regime, the action inadvertently destabilized an entire region. Long-standing allies hesitated. Critics grew louder. Global trust began to fracture. For the first time since World War II, large parts of the world openly questioned not just America's methods, but its fundamental judgment. The policeman was still heavily armed, but its authority was no longer taken for granted. Years turned into a decade, and then more. The wars dragged on. In Washington, governments changed and military strategies shifted. But the fighting on the ground did not end. Back home, public opinion underwent a massive transformation. The initial surge of support gave way to a deep-seated fatigue. Confidence turned into widespread doubt. Americans started asking tough questions that their leaders struggled to answer. What does victory actually look like? How long does our responsibility last? And who gets to decide when it's finally over? When U.S. forces eventually withdrew from positions they had held for years, the images carried immense symbolic weight. To some, it signaled restraint and a new wisdom. To others, it looked like a retreat. For America's allies, it raised serious concerns about commitment. And for its rivals, it suggested a new opportunity. The world began to recalculate America's position, not because the country was weak, but because it was choosing to act differently. While the United States was deeply focused on its wars on terror, the global landscape was quietly but dramatically changing. China was expanding its economic and military might. Russia was reasserting its power in its own region. Other middle powers were gaining new confidence. The international system no longer revolved around a single, undisputed center. Power was spreading, and with it, so was competition. Being the world's policeman now meant navigating a far more crowded and complicated street. China didn't challenge the U.S. through sudden, open confrontation. It did so gradually through trade, massive infrastructure projects, and rapid technological advancement. Instead of trying to tear down the existing global system, China sought to influence it from within, reshaping it over time to suit its own interests. This posed a completely different kind of challenge. It wasn't a battlefield conflict. It was a long-term strategic rivalry. Policing this new environment required patience, careful coordination, and restraint, not constant military intervention. Russia's approach was different, more direct, more regional. It aggressively tested boundaries, challenged alliances, and asserted its influence close to its borders. Each move forced the United States to respond, but to do so very carefully. A direct confrontation risked a catastrophic escalation, but doing nothing risked losing credibility. This difficult balancing act became the new normal in global politics. For decades, America's alliances were its greatest strength, but alliances require constant leadership, consistency, and above all, trust. As U.S. priorities shifted, its allies had to adjust. Some began investing more heavily in their own defense. Others started exploring the idea of strategic autonomy. They weren't rejecting American leadership, but they could no longer assume it would always be there to arrive first. The United States still responds to global crises, but it does so differently now. There's less appetite for long-term occupation and more emphasis on coordination with partners. This isn't a withdrawal from the world stage, it's a recalibration. The role is changing from a permanent enforcer to a crisis responder, from trying to control outcomes to managing risks. Foreign policy never exists in a vacuum. Economic pressures, deep political polarization, and social change at home all influence how a nation uses its power abroad. American leaders now have to weigh not only the global consequences of their actions, but also the domestic realities. Every military intervention faces intense scrutiny. Every deployment demands a clear justification. The cost of policing the world is no longer an abstract concept. For many Americans, it has become deeply personal, and modern power itself has changed. It no longer depends solely on boots on the ground. Cyber operations, artificial intelligence, and assets in space are reshaping how influence is projected. The policeman's uniform is changing, and so is the very nature of the battlefield. So, the question remains, is the era of the American policed world ending? Or is the United States simply learning that control is not the same thing as leadership? History offers a stark warning. Great powers often fall, not when they lose their strength, but when they fail to adapt to a changing world. The U.S. still possesses unmatched capabilities, but the world it once dominated has evolved. Adaptation is no longer optional. It's essential for survival. The next crisis is already forming, somewhere out there. A miscalculation in a tense region, a sudden confrontation, the unexpected collapse of a state. When it happens, the world will once again look toward Washington. But this time, it may not be for domination, but for direction. Whether the United States chooses to lead, to support its allies, or to step aside, will shape not just its own future, but everyone else's as well. The badge of the world's policeman was never official. It was earned through action and questioned through consequence. Now, as power disperses and new tensions rise, that role stands at a historic crossroads. Will America continue to intervene whenever order collapses? Will it rely more on its partners than on its own power? Will it redefine what leadership means in the 21st century or resist change? And perhaps the most unsettling question of all, if the world no longer has a single policeman, what happens when the next global crisis erupts? Is global stability even possible without a dominant enforcer? Can shared leadership truly replace unilateral power? If a vacuum of power is created, who or what will fill it? Are we witnessing the end of an era, or the beginning of a far more unpredictable one? Thank you for watching. If you found this exploration insightful, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on our future content.